Okay, here we go. Is it? Why am I not? Okay, here we go. Are we fine now?
Yeah.
All right. Coming on. It's warming up. So, Paulina, you're recording?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there any problem with that?
Oh, God, no, no, no. I was going to say, just then please pass the recording to me. Would you do that for me?
That's okay. That's perfect.
Great, because I'm always afraid when we use technology that if I do the same thing as you're doing, perhaps everything is going to crash and things will fall apart and the like. So I'm counting on your recording then.
Okay.
We all are.
This is the first time I do this, so I don't know if it's going to work. But anyway, count on my recording.
If anyone wants to record, please do. Just make sure that that we get things going. Okay, so are we all on the same page? Can you get do you get to see what I see?
Yes, I think
Good.
I do.
All right,
Yeah.
wonderful.
The basics of drama.
The very basics of drama, just in case. I wanted to start with the very, very basics, and I'm going to dash through this. In drama, we have the dramatic text and the spectacular text. I've mentioned this already. And this is Fernandez y Gonzalez's definition. The dramatic text is the book, okay? The text, the written text. And the spectacular text is the performance of the text. We all know that, and that is the simplest of things. Usually when we make references to the text, it is the dramatic text we're talking about, because that is what we have read, except those of you that only watched the performance. And in the dramatic text, we have the largest distinction is between speech, which is the spoken word, or the word as it is meant to be spoken, what I call the pretext, and the stage directions. Stage directions is what the playwright defines, or how the playwright defines that the play should be performed. And so you're going to have the characters, the manner of elocution, prosody, movement, blocking, the set, the time, stage props, costumes, you name it. Okay? This, again, is the basics of the very basics. But I just wanted to make sure that you have it. Now, once we talk about drama, we need to, I'm trying to, oh, here we go. Okay. Now, when we talk about drama, one of the great drama thinkers is Peter Brook, who, Brooks, I think it is. I'm sorry, it's Peter Brooks. Peter Brooks. I don't know. Well, one of the two. In any case, the title of the book is right. He offered his definition of the theater, and he directed his observations towards 4 different types of theater, the way he saw it, okay, sees it. And that he deems essential: the deadly theater, the holy theater, the rough theater, and the immediate theater. In his book, The Empty Space, a book about the theater, Brooks describes the theater as simply as the action of, and I quote, a man who walks across an empty space whilst someone else is watching, end quote. So he believes any empty space can become a stage for a performative text. Okay? And I quote again: I can take any empty space and call it a bare stage. He argues that the theater is a society in miniature, a microcosm brought together every evening within that space. Okay? But once we define, or he rather defines the theater, we find these four categories that he produces. And he denounces that the most common type of theater, the one that audiences flock to or fall victim to, is what he calls the deadly theater, which Brooks thinks is boring theater because it is slowly dying, he says. And I quote, "The deadly theater is most closely linked to the despised, much attacked commercial theater. I keep quoting, it might seem a waste of time to criticize it further," says Brooks. It is Brooks. You see, when I don't think about it, it comes. So Brooks, I'm sorry for the typo. So Brooks believes the deadly theater surfaces in the theatrical environment because audiences have predisposed expectations about a play. I was going to say about a text, but audiences are more interested about the play. And that poses a problem because the actors, he says, are denied of the possibility or the opportunity to play with the text, to do things with it, to explore it, to create within it, because of time constraints, because you need to premiere the text, etc. So they have to go by the book, which makes the text, he believes, sound unnatural or even fake. And I quote again, "When we say deadly, we never mean dead. We mean something depressingly active, but for this very reason, capable of change. The first step towards change is facing the simple and attractive fact that most of what is called a theater anywhere in the world is a travesty of a word once full of sense." End quote. Because the deadly theater is mostly commercial theater, the problem with it, of course, is the time, as I said, that the companies have to prepare for the show. And once the play opens, it becomes boring because the text becomes memorized, repeated as if by rote, okay? However, the deadly theater exists because audiences want it. They have come to expect it, to derive pleasure from it. And of course, that is the market itself. Think about, when we think of the deadly theater, think about the plays that we get to see in the city of Carlos Paz or Mar del Plata, for example. Very commercial, very non-textual, just repeated by rote, okay? Another type of theater that the Brooks mentions is the holy theater. And that is, I quote, "the theater of the invisible made visible." Brooks wonders, and I quote again, "Can the invisible be made visible through the performer's presence?" According to him, this type of theater reveals everything that escapes our senses and makes it visible on stage. So the holy theater is the one that discovers for the audience, for the spectators, new information. Yes?
When you say that it makes visible something that escapes the audience's understanding, yes, or feeling it in reality, in real life, let's say.
Yes, of course, figuratively, it makes visible or not, because on stage what you see is we are going to see that, for example, when we discuss A Raisin in the Sun, when we talk about how the particularism of the universality of the play. Of course, the particularism too, but the universality of the play is, well, people that don't have money, right? But then you may be a white spectator and you go see that play, and that play may discover something for you. And when I say discover, I say make something visible for you in the black characters that you see. Am I clear here? So
yes, thank you.
Good. So basically, you may be white but feel identified in those black characters, or in some white black character, and in those characters then you are seeing, hence making something visible, seeing something that is not, or that you have not seen about you before. So the Holy Theater focuses on the problems of the universe, and it manifests these abstract problems in concrete shape and form, because that's what the theater does. And I quote again, not only does it present the invisible, but it also offers conditions to make its perception possible. And I think that that is truly fascinating. So in the Holy Theater, Brooks argues, directors desire something new. They want to discover something unspoken, to quote Tennessee Williams, new situations with a deeper meaning than what the Deadly Theater can portray. And this does not mean that one has to be drama and the other one is comedy. Not at all. You may have Deadly Theater that is dramatic, right? So this is the desire to make visible that which has been invisible to the moment, and that attracts audiences. On the other hand, the rough theater, and then we're moving away perhaps from a type of theater that we may know, unless of course you know Athol Fugard and his grassroots work in South Africa. But the rough theater seems to be more down to earth, dirtier too. It's a theater that unites spectators and actors, creating dynamics between audience members and the performers in, and I quote, a neutral, open platform. The rough theater observes simple things, natural things, and places them in informal settings. And that brings joy to the audiences. So if you were to think of what the rough theater is, say here in Argentina, you may see certain performances that are done in shanty towns, poor areas, or in sports clubs, or even in prisons, right? And that not because the space is non-conventional, but because of the work in them is a joint creation. Do you follow me?
Yes.
Good. I once went to see in Mexico a performance of Richard III in a maximum security prison. And the play, of course, the Shakespeare play, had been written or rewritten or adapted by the inmates. and the inmates saw things there, and that was a changing experience for them, for me, for the director, for everyone. So it doesn't necessarily have to do with the unconventional space, but rather the type of work carried out there. Brooks believes that the rough theater is closer and more honest to the heart of the audience members. And for that reason, it is popular, not in the sense of a lot of people go to see it, but in the sense of it is closer to the heart of the people. While the Holy Theater tackles and unleashes the hidden, right, the rough theater looks at real events and actions and directly affect the viewer. You may say that the Holy Theater tackles the grand themes and the rough theater tackles your immediate issues, right? And speaking of immediate, the immediate theater is very close to the rough theater, but it asserts itself in the present, Brooks says. He believes that in every, and I'm quoting, in everyday life, if is a fiction. In the theater, if is an experiment. I keep quoting. In everyday life, if is an invitation. In the theater, if is the truth, right? Immediate theater happens when the audience is reacting to the theatrical event on the stage, which is, and I quote, an arena where a living confrontation takes place. The rough theater and the immediate theater are very closely connected. However, the immediate theater tends to be more spontaneous with no text, no written pretext, right? The audience's reactions are different every time because the audience itself is different every time, and it is hard to predict what or how the audience will react. And I quote again the last time, the artist is not there to indict, nor to lecture, not to harangue, and least of all, not to teach. He is a part of them. In the immediate theater, spectators should not indulge themselves in just watching because what is happening on the stage is also or should be happening in their hearts because there is a joint construction. Now, this is Brooks' taxonomy on the theater, but where do you think our two plays here, The Zoo Story and A Raisin in the Sun, stand? What are they? And I have to say, even though Brooks hates the Deadly Theater is there for a reason, and it's good. I mean, I don't mind the Deadly Theater. So, where do we stand with our two plays? Where would you place them?
Could it be in Holy Theater, maybe?
Well, at a time, you could say that. Perhaps when they premiered the two in 59, yeah, the two come from 59. When they premiered, I think that they had a lot to say about the grand issues of society. Perhaps now, and depending on how you put that play on, it could very well be Deadly Theater. You know, you could have any of these two plays or either of these two plays as deadly if you just make it a commercial endeavor. And I was thinking about A Raisin in the Sun, and you could adapt very well, and perhaps you may have felt that too. A Raisin in the Sun could be adapted and take place anywhere in Argentina. you just transfer the black issue here and you place it elsewhere, right? You place these issues in a slum, for example, and then you could make it rough theater, even immediate theater, if there is joint construction. Okay? So this again, I'm covering the basics of the basics. Again, it is the same play, could be different things, just for us to take to put in our pipes and smoke. So, couple of things, interesting facts about the zoo story, other than the facts presented by Paola Longo, who is here, and thank you for your research. It was Olby's first plays, written in only 3 weeks in 58. It was originally rejected in New York, so you may have read that it premiered in Germany, and you may say, why in Germany? Because nobody wanted it. And then it was later defined as the best first play by a living author, by a playwright. Okay? I think that that is kind of interesting. So, characters. I'm doing well with time. I'm checking everything. So, 2 characters, Peter and Jerry. We're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to give you the chance to, you have read this, of course, but we're going to talk about Peter and Jerry. Peter is a man in his early 40s, neither fat nor gaunt, neither handsome nor homely. He wears tweeds, smokes a pipe, carries horn-rimmed glasses. Although he is moving into middle age, his dress and his manner would suggest a man younger. Who is Peter? What can you tell us about Peter? You've done the reading. You've answered the questions. You've seen the play, hopefully. Who is Peter? Any ideas?
Well, Peter is a middle class or upper middle class man. We may say that he stands for, I don't know, the optimistic middle class man who lives in conformity. He's a bourgeois.
Okay.
He stands for order.
Yes, yes. Who was that? Who was speaking?
Bettina.
Bettina, all right. So, yes, Peter is the mainstream. He stands for the mainstream. He is the comfortably conformist, the empty American everyman. Remember that Olby eventually will write the other plays in which he focuses on the everyman, right? The nobody. Well, in this case, if you think about Peter, think that everything in him is sensible. It makes sense. Peter is an average. His clothes are sensible. His glasses are sensible. His posture, his mannerism, and even his age. Think about it. He is 40, 42. So he is in the middle of his life, if you think about it. And I think that that is fascinating because he represents middle America at the time in 59, right? He is, and yet that commonness in Peter, that mainstream quality in Peter is youthful and vibrant, as he is defined, right? Mm-hmm. So what is Olby really saying about the mainstream with him? Do you have any ideas?
Well, he's definitely criticizing, he's defying this middle class.
All right. In a way, you could very well say that. So, but he is saying that what everybody thinks about life and society and the like, the common thought, ordinary thought, the mainstream as such is alive and kicking. And that is interesting. However, and I agree with you when you say that he criticizes it, because in the very first part of the scene, he takes his glasses and cleans them. There's a critic, Marianne Doane, Doanne, Marianne Doane, who has studied the use of glasses. And for example, how women in the media, in early media in the 60s and 70s, women with glasses were stereotypically ugly. And you may have seen it because that is a common image in life. When a woman wants to be better looking, she takes off her glasses in comedies and stuff, right? Well, the idea of the glasses is the idea of watching. So he takes off his glasses, Peter does, and puts them on again to watch better. And that is the invigilating eye of the masses, of society at large. You follow me?
Yeah.
That was, by the way, that
Yes.
wasn't Marianne Doane.
Yeah.
That is me taking Marianne Doane, right? But who is Jerry?
Totally the opposite.
Yeah.
I'm sorry? Did anybody say something? Oh, no.
Well,
Yes.
I think that Jerry represents the complete opposite of what Peter is. Even the
Yes.
way he dresses, the way he speaks, even his mannerism. I would say his body language. When I was
Yes.
watching the video, he would speak and he would just move like his hands, and he would be like too, in a way, too rough to speak in a way, and he would just raise his voice. Um, he was like the complete opposite of Peter. And while I was reading the paper, it says that he is like the anti-establishment hero.
Yes. Yes.
So he represents the, like, I would say, like the dark side of the American dream or the American society.
Well, he is
Uh,
the American nightmare for sure. And it's very interesting what you're saying because Peter is the establishment and Jerry is the anti-establishment, right? He is younger to begin with, not that much, but he is carelessly dressed, careless, like a revolution in a certain extent. However, he looks tired, a great weariness. And I'm very interested in you focusing on the idea of weariness, because that is the word that is repeated in A Raisin in the Sun. Notice there is at the end of the 1950s this idea of tiredness that brought about the 60s, that produced the revolution of the 60s, the free thinking of the 60s, I'm sorry. These two plays in a way put a lid on the 1950s conservatism. Okay? Notice at the same time, other than the weariness of it, that in both plays, Jerry is defined as a schizo, practically, a madman, crazy. With Jules, we were talking about that on the forum a couple of days ago. And on the other hand, Walter, in A Raisin in the Sun, is described as a neurotic. Well, would you please, whoever it is, mute your mic? Because you're killing me. Thank you. So, as I was saying, Jerry is a schizo and Walter is a neurotic. Where does that take us? So, setting. How am I doing with time? Okay, good. Setting. It is Central Park, a Sunday afternoon in summer, the present. There are 2 park benches, one towards either side of the stage. They both face the audience. Behind them, foliage, trees, sky. At the beginning, Peter is sitting in one of the benches. As the curtain rises, Peter is sitting on the bench stage right. He is reading a book. He stops reading, cleans his glasses, goes back to reading. Jerry enters. Now, attention, please. I wanted to call your attention to one fact. In both, in the stage directions, there's meant to be 2 benches, as you can see in this set here, right? The play that I uploaded and the footage that Paola Longo presented, those 2 performances present only 1 bench, which I believe is a mistake. How does it change the play to have the other bench, another bench on the stage? Because that is a detail that perhaps if you read the play, you didn't notice, that you watched the play and you forgot about the other bench. But there's supposed to be 2 benches, Olby tells us.
I think it makes it more absurd that they are fighting for 1 bench when there are 2.
Yes.
To share.
Yes. Good. What else?
I also think that it has to do with fighting for the territory, in the sense that you are treading upon somebody else's place or personal space in this case.
Yes, 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 I agree. Yes.
It could also mean that there's plenty for everybody. Everyone could have their bench, but still only one will have the American dream, let's say.
I think that what you're saying is interesting, that there's plenty for everyone, but the American dream demands that you own your own bench and you don't share it, in spite of the fact that you might, right? And in that respect, yes.
Excuse me, could it be that each bench represents each character? I mean, the words, the tradition versus
the establishment versus the anti-establishment. Yes. We have no further references in the text to the 2 benches, and of course Jerry could very well sit on his own bench, but he doesn't. So that is open to interpretation, but I thought it was fascinating to really see that there's 2 benches, but they're fighting over 1. About the conquest of that 1 bench. All right? So I'll leave it up to you. That would make a beautiful paper. I'm just saying. And notice this other performance except for the fact that there's a woman as Peter, I thought that this set design was fascinating, truly fascinating, because I think that it highlights a lot of the symbols in the play. Can we please elaborate on that?
Well, the bars behind them might refer to the cages in the zoo that Jerry referred to.
Good. The cages in the zoo, and also the cages in which they are entrapped, right?
In society, because society is the metaphorical zoo.
Exactly, absolutely. And I think that that is fascinating. Notice the walls too.
Right. They are like
Yes.
coming down.
Yes. Yes. And I think that
it's not coming down. I was thinking about that, but there are bricks missing, as if I don't know. There's a structure that is not entirely complete. It's not made of these bricks, but pretends to still be standing.
Right. If you look at that those two walls, you could very well remember Robert Frost's poem Mending Wall, right? Something there is that doesn't love a wall and sends the broken ground swell under it, right? This idea of the two, I think that that is the intertext of this set design, right? And I think that that would be a beautiful paper, a comparison between Robert Frost's Mending Wall and this stage design. Because there is this idea of something coming down somehow, but at the same time it is not coming down. But I agree with Jules. It is sort of coming down or becoming visible, if you will, and I think that that is interesting too. Can I move? Yes.
I have a question. Why is Peter represented by a woman in that version?
I honestly do not know. I haven't seen that performance. The theater allows for that sometimes. My choice would never be to have Peter as a woman. Perhaps Jerry as a woman, but not Peter. But it is what it is. I cannot answer that, unfortunately. So I'm going to move on because I think, I do not remember whether it was Bettina or Jules who said that they were interested in thinking about the theater of the absurd, right? And is this the theater of the absurd or is it not, right? So this is Martin Esslin. This is the book was published in 2008, but this is a much older piece. And Esslin thinks that if a good play must have a cleverly constructed plot, these have no story. These, meaning the theater of the absurd, have no story or plot to speak of. If a good play is judged by subtlety of characterization and motivation, these are often without recognizable characters and present the audience with almost mechanical puppets. If a good play has to have a fully explained theme, which is neatly exposed and finally solved, these often have neither a beginning nor an end. If a good play is to hold the mirror up to nature, remember that, well, we will see the mirror in a second. That is a Jerry speech. Up to nature and portray the manners and mannerisms of the age in finely observed sketches. These seem often to be reflections of dreams and nightmares. If a good play relies on witty repartee and pointed dialogue, these often consist of incoherent babblings. If we take this definition by Esslin of the theater of the absurd, would you say that the zoo story is absurdist?
No.
Okay, I heard one no, and that is good enough for me. No,
because but for me, the characters are not mechanical puppets. Good. There is a plot to speak of.
Yes.
It has a beginning and an end.
And a very tragic end. Yes.
Right. You're right. Well, I'm not so sure about the nightmare part, because probably this play is someone's nightmare.
Well, yeah. Peter's nightmare, for sure.
For sure. And even though there are some parts that could be regarded as incoherent babblings, the play has a very strong message. So,
yes,
according to this definition, no, I wouldn't say it is an example of the theater of the absurd.
I agree with you. However, we're always here to contest things, and everything that I present here is to be contested. This is again the same paper by Estlin, The Theater of the Absurd. The theater of the absurd, however, can be seen as the reflection of what seems to be the attitude most genuinely representative of our time. And in that respect, I have to say, well, somehow, as I said, 59, this was opening the doorway to what was to come. The theater of the absurd has renounced arguing about the absurdity of the human condition. It merely presents it in being, that is, in terms of concrete stage images. In that respect, of course, notice that I had to cut and paste all of these things together to contest the same Essling, right? And in that respect, we do have all these images. And even though this is a one-act play, at the same time, I think that it is very interesting to notice the rising action, right? Because that is very definite. You could say, okay, there's one step higher and one step higher and one step higher, and the action keeps rising, right? The theater of the absurd tends toward a radical devaluation of language, toward a poetry that is to emerge from the concrete and objectified images of the stage itself. I wouldn't know about this one that much, but I wanted to place it anyway. The element of language still plays an important part in this conception, but what happens on the stage transcends and often contradicts the words spoken by the characters. So, if we take these ideas, again, same paper, people, you may say, well, perhaps the interesting part is that Martin Esslin wrote the introduction to our play, The Zoo Story, the copy that you have in 65, sorry. The copy is. And what he says about the play is, the Zoo Story, one of all these earliest dramatic ventures, his earliest one, has a similar complexity. It is clinically accurate. It is a clinically accurate study of schizophrenia, an image of a man's loneliness and inability to make contact, and also on the ritual and symbolic level, an act of ritual self-immolation. This is what happens. I dictate to the computer and the computer does things, and then I check and I forget, and I never notice these mistakes. That has curious parallels with Christ's atonement. Here we go. Note the names Jerry, Jesus, and Peter. And Jules, you were asking about this, where this is the very last thing that we're going to be talking about. Is Jerry Jesus? We'll talk about it in a second. The realism here is a psychological and inner realism. It explores the human subconscious in depth rather than trying to describe the outward appearance of human existence. This is Essling saying this is absurd drama. However, I would encourage you to criticize that perspective. I would. Essling is not God, because according to Jerry, God is a black drag queen. It is true that basically the theater of the absurd attacks the uncomfortable certainties of religious or political orthodoxy. It aims to shock the audience out of complacency, to bring it face to face with the harsh facts of the human situation as these writers see it. So, you could argue for or against the very, very same idea, okay? So, I would argue that the Zoo Story is an absurdist play. That is my perspective. At least it has a lot of elements to it that make it absurdist. However, at the same time, the ending, and I agree with, of course, one of the papers that you read, the ending is too, and I'm going to say this unabashedly, too optimistic. Okay, let's go there. Why not? Why not? Why would I say that the ending is optimistic?
I didn't perceive it that way, but I read some other papers on the Zoo Story after our exchange in the forum.
Yes.
And I read that some critics consider that it is optimistic because Jerry's death somehow gives hope for the minorities that are usually disregarded. In the sense that his death is meaningful and it will mean that the establishment will start to care for them or something of the sort.
Well,
I feel that way when I read it.
Right. If you think about it, coming to you, just let me cut in here. If you think about it, Jules, Jerry's death is optimistic in the sense that Jesus's death is optimistic.
Right. Yeah.
In that respect, change is coming because of that. And as Jerry says at the very beginning of the play, you're going to see or read that in the news, right?
Yeah. But that's what made me wonder, because I said, how much media coverage is that going to get?
Well, there is more media coverage in kill in or a murder in a park than a suicide in a rooming, in that respect. Yes, who was going to say something?
Me, Paulina, but I was just about to say what you said, that's why they compare Jerry with Jesus, because of his death.
Actually, I have to admit, I thought of the Jesus thing before I read the Jesus thing here, because I had never read Estling's introduction to this book, Absurd Drama. I read it a couple of days ago, and I go like, oh, okay, there goes my idea. So I'm not going to be writing a paper on it. Some themes: absurdity and reality, miscommunication, lack of human connection, loneliness and urban alienation, social disparity, capitalism and the American dream, alternative sexualities, and a couple of symbols to watch out for: the dog story or the dog itself, the bench, the zoo, the knife, and Jerry. Now I need to start rushing because it's been an hour already. Jeez. So, absurdity and reality and miscommunication. Let me see, because I think I got lost. Okay, yeah, I'm fine. So, you know this, Peter, these are different quotes from different sections. I didn't mean to seem, it's that you don't really carry a conversation. You just ask questions, and I'm normally reticent. Why do you just stand there? Again, this takes you in, if you take a couple of these examples, you may say, well, that is kind of absurd. And as part of, there is lack of communication here. In that respect, you could say that the two characters are speaking almost different languages. However, I think that it takes a certain amount of it is kind of sophistication. That should be the word. To say that the mainstream and the anti-establishment speak different languages, and in that respect, that is an absurdist play. So I don't know. What were you trying to do? Make sense out of things? Bring order? The old pigeonhole bit? Well, that's easy, I'll tell you. I think about it, make sense out of things. What were you trying to do? This and postmodernism didn't exist in 59. And this is an instance of self-referentiality. And I find it fascinating in that quote that in a so-called absurdist play, Albee would place this. Makes sense out of things. There's no sense here. Bring order. Because again, if Peter is the establishment brings order. That's what it does. How are we doing? Are we fine? Am I going too fast?
No, it's great.
Okay, good. Oh, come on now, Peter. Tell me what you think. Peter, numb. I don't understand. I don't think almost tearfully. Why did you tell me all of this? Why not? I don't understand. Furious but whispering. That's a lie. No, it's not. Quietly, I tried to explain it to you as I went along. I went slowly. It all has to do with, okay? So these are some instances. Are we still recording, by the way? I don't remember who was it.
Yes.
Okay, don't give me that you're not recording. Loneliness and urban alienation and lack of human connection. Again, a couple of examples to prove this theme. I live in a 4-story brownstone rooming house. I live on the top floor, rear west. Very, very picky. It's a laughably small room. The room beyond is occupied by a colored queen. There's a Puerto Rican family in one of them, a husband and wife, some kids, I don't know how many. And in the other front room, there's somebody living there. I don't know who it is. I've never seen who it is. Never, ever. Again, this idea that he doesn't know who he is living with. Think of the portraits, the empty portraits, for the love of God, right? That is so sad, so heart-wrenching, really. And another one, Jerry again. It's just that you can't, if you can't deal with people, you have to make a start somewhere. With animals, don't you see? A person have to have some way of dealing with something. If not with people, something. With a bed, with a cockroach, with a mirror. No, that's too hard. That's one of the last steps. I find this bit horrendous, so sad indeed, that a person would have to deal and think of a bed as a companion, right? Another one. Now I'll tell you on what happened at the zoo. But first, I should tell you why I went to the zoo. I went to the zoo to find out more about the way people exist with animals and the way animals exist with each other and with people too. What can you tell me about this excerpt in particular?
It could be related to something that was discussed in the forum, the symbol of the caged individuals, as animals are caged in a zoo. Individuals in this society are also caged.
Right.
But the bars are invisible.
Yes. I think that what really calls my attention is that people do not relate to one another. We are told about animals relating to animals and to people, but we don't have, or people existing with animals, but we are not told about people existing with people. So reinforces the idea of alienation and lack of human connection.
Absolutely, yes. And think about the fact that Jerry will become someone. He is so anonymous, so nobody, that he will eventually become someone in the news when he is dead. And that is horrible, right? Because he will, yes.
What really, when I was reading the story, what really caught my attention was the fact that there was a lack of empathy between individuals. Like, you could see Jerry was like undergoing a tough life, and there was and Peter was, although he was the representation of the good side of the American society, he didn't want to help, and he was like, Jerry didn't exist. And for me, it's the lack of empathy. If I see someone suffering, I would do anything, even just like, you can talk to me if something is going on in your life, you can count on me. And I feel that in a way humans were reduced as animals because they didn't care about one another, and that was really sad.
It is. It's horrid.
Yeah, and it's really hard for me to think about the play as an optimistic play in itself because of that. In the end, Peter leaves, is off stage, and Jerry is left alone. So I wonder how that might be, read or interpreted as optimistic when we have such an appalling view of life. I mean,
yes.
I mean, probably Peter at that moment felt in despair because of the situation, but still, he did not stay with Jerry. He's off stage. So, okay, we might have some feelings, but still, we may opt for the individual and not, for the community somehow.
Right. I see your point completely. The thing is that if we consider Jerry's interpretation of him as a Christ-like figure, well, it is as optimistic as Christ's crucifixion. You may not see it upbeat, but it's supposedly, the Bible says, he died for all of us, right? In that respect, yes.
I was thinking that perhaps it is optimistic in the way in which it's teaching a lesson to Peter. And in teaching Peter, perhaps they are teaching society to see things through different lenses, let's say, to start analyzing what's going on.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, probably it's optimistic because it's not teaching a lesson to Peter, but it may be teaching a lesson to the audience.
Well, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I see where you're going. Of course, it's outside of the audience. If you think of this as Holy Theater, and where I'm taking us back to Brooks, think about it. Of course, the audience the spectators should be learning something or seeing themselves represented in some way on the stage, right? Of course, yes. Now, this one is short, Social Disparity, Capitalism and the American Dream. It's practically even pointless. I'm going to read the very last one. Jerry, you have everything in the world you want. You've told me about your home and your family and your own little zoo. You have everything, and now you want this bench. This is a criticism to capitalism. And think that this play was performed in the during McCarthyism, right? And that communists and socialists were persecuted. And Albee is saying this: you want everything, right? That is what it is. It is the American dream, but it's also the American nightmare, right? And I need to go to Erase It in the Sun. Alternative sexualities there are. Edward Albee was a gay playwright who fought all his life not to be considered gay. Not because he didn't want to be pigeonholed as a gay author, right? However, I find it very interesting that this play is filled with references as to Jerry being a gay man, right? At the very beginning, Peter says, "Oh, you live in the village." This seems to enlighten Peter, and the village, of course, was a queer, a gay, an LGBT plus neighborhood. At the time, it still is, of course. That is where the Stonewall revolts or uprisings in 68, 69 occurred. So, right, that kind of places you in that place. Then Jerry says, "Oh, wait, for a week and a half, when I was 15, I hang my head in shame that puberty was late. I was homosexual. I mean, I was queer, with bells ringing, banners snapping in the wind." Jerry, how about that with God, who is the colored queen who wears a kimono and plucks his eyebrows, who is a woman who cries with determination behind her closed door, with God, who I'm told turned his back on the whole thing some time ago, with someday with people. And you won't find a policeman around here. They're all over the west side of the park chasing fairies down from trees and out of the bushes. The park was a place for sexual encounters, and the police would patrol that area to prevent that. Of course, fairies is slang for a gay man, right? There are lots and lots of references, but you have to remember that up until 1968, with Mark Crowley's The Boys in the Band, there are literally no plays, and this is McCarthyism up until practically that time, there was no play in which a gay character would not end up dead, disappeared, or anything of the sort, right? So you do have in this period a lot of dead gay men here. So in that respect, this is a queer play, and it is interesting what Albee did with it, right? So, symbols to watch out for so that we can finish running late with the zoo story. The dog story, again, points to alienation. The bench would be this idea of territory, and well, the zoo and the cages and all of that, and the knife and Jerry. Of course, I thought about this image. This is a Caravaggio, the incredulity of Thomas. And when Jerry is stabbed in the performance that we saw, I instantly remember this image, right? This idea of, well, in this case, putting his finger inside the wound, but this image came to mind, and then I thought of a Jesus-like image in Jerry. Okay? Okay, I know I had to rush, but any questions about the zoo story?
No.
Okay, good.
No.
That was...
Sorry, I just wanted
Yes.
to ask. There's
Yes.
a presentation you mentioned that it's the presentation uploaded in the platform already. The
No.
presentation. Sorry.
What I don't know what by presentation I mean performance, right? Or this presentation.
No. I meant Paola's presentation. You mentioned.
Oh, it is. It has been uploaded.
Yes.
I couldn't see that.
No, me neither.
It is in the following page after classes in the book.
Okay.
All right.
So you go to the next page and you have a 3-part presentation by her.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
Thank
I should have let you know. I thought that you had this down with Professor Bouteler, but let me know in case you do not find it, okay?
Yeah.
But Paola has a presentation, and then of course we will upload this presentation as well. So, Erase It in the Sun. I don't know how... we can move on, right? You're fine in that respect. Yeah. Okay, good, good. So this is the film Erasing in the Sun from 64, I think. The reference to 94 is the edition of the book that I have. So this is Sidney Poitier, huge actor, and you can recognize all the characters in the performance that we saw of the play. Because it was a college performance, the kid Travis, that's supposed to be 10, was like 27. I don't know. He was 18, 19 probably, but the kid is supposed to be younger, as you can see here. Okay, so I wanted to provide this bit of information at the very beginning before we started, because Hansberry's parents bought a house in the white neighborhood of Washington Park, an action that resulted in a legal case, Hansberry versus Lee. The Hansberry family, a family home, a red brick 3-floor at 6140 South Rhodes, which they bought in 37, is up for landmark status before the Chicago City Council's Committee on Historical Landmarks presentation. So what I wanted to present here is perhaps Hansberry wrote Erasing in the Sun to a certain extent out of this family experience, right? And I thought that it was cute. So a little bit of trivia, because since there is no presentation on this, here we go. Erasing in the Sun was the first play written by a Black woman to be produced on Broadway, as well as the first with a Black director. That was Lloyd Richards. Hansberry noted that her play introduced details of Black life to the overwhelmingly white Broadway audiences, while director Richards observed that it was the first play to which large numbers of people were drawn. Black play, yeah. Frank Rich wrote in 1983 in the New York Times that Erasing in the Sun changed American theater forever. They keep saying that of all plays anyway, so. And in 1960, Erasing in the Sun was nominated for 4 Tony Awards: Best Play, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Direction. A little bit of trivia. Now, the epigraph to the play is a poem by Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? Now, I wanted to give you a quick presentation on the Harlem Renaissance, but I will not, because we may be running out of time. So, cutting. Here we go. If we have time at the end, I'll come back to it. And I may upload for you a little video on the Harlem Renaissance. Would that be fine? You know, to wrap up these ideas. How many of you are familiar with the Harlem Renaissance?
Not me.
Oh, not me.
Okay, good. Then I promise I will record a little video about the Harlem Renaissance and about Langston Hughes. But in a nutshell, the Harlem Renaissance was a very short-lived movement in Harlem, in New York City, where you had painters and dancers and singers and playwrights and novelists and short story writers and poets, all together producing Black art. When I say Black, is what I mean is they were all Black and they all cared about producing a whole movement, multi or interdisciplinary movement of recognition of themselves, of their art, of their heritage, of their importance to the world, right? So Langston Hughes was one, Langston Hughes was one of the most important representatives of the movement. Others were Countee Cullen, Sterling Brown, Zora Neale Hurston. There were lots of men and women. A lot of them were LGBTQ plus. Langston Hughes was gay. Neale Hurston was a lesbian, etc. They produced a massive amount of work. And the Harlem Renaissance is worth studying. So I'll give you a presentation in Hughes only, but everybody should read Langston Hughes' poetry. So, and I'll just read this because I have to. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. Notice the Euphrates is the birth of civilization, Western civilization. I built my hut near the Congo and it lulled me to sleep. African heritage. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. Again, the pyramids as the symbol of culture, of Western culture, again, as the result of a Black man, right? And I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. So I'll give you an analysis of this poem and this one too. But again, they were all talking about revolution, and this is the 1920s, right? And 30s perhaps. But it was very short-lived. So enough about this. when we think of A Raisin in the Sun, we may consider this a feminine play, right? When I say a feminine play, and I know that we're going to be talking about womanism, etc., but when we think of a feminine play, we are thinking that it has somehow three female protagonists. But then you may say, what about Walter? What about Walter? We like Walter. What about Walter? You tell me about Walter. Do you want to talk about Walter?
He's not entirely the man of the house. Mama is the woman of the house, even though in a male-driven society, the man should be.
Okay. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, Mama, since the death of the father, Mama is the head of is a matriarchic society or matriarchic organization. So until Walter really deserves to be the head of the family, which he does at the end, and this is one of the paper saying this that we had to read. He will not become the head of the family, so he's always trying to be deserving of that place.
Right.
And frustrated as well.
How many of you don't lie? I understand if you haven't, you're all busy, but how many of you got to read the play or see the play?
I have.
Oh, you all have. I want to cry now. Okay.
I didn't watch the version you uploaded. I watched the TV version that was produced.
It's probably new. Well, I don't know whether it's newer.
I know Danny Glover, Walter, very young Danny Glover.
Oh, all right, that's old.
Yes, very good.
Well, by the way, I wanted to say about A Raisin in the Sun that is not a very commonly studied play here in Argentina. Among us, I mean, English professionals, but this is a pivotal play in American culture. When I say pivotal, I mean I do not know any American who hasn't read it. Like that strong this play is. Perhaps I only know very learned Americans. That's another possibility. Now, even though I'm going to start talking about these three women, I will start with Walter, just because patriarchy, what can I say? Walter embodies the epigraph of Hugh's poem, What Happens to a Dream Deferred, right? Because he is the one that chooses to explode, right? Notice that his movements are defined or described as explosive, right? And I think that is interesting. So if you read, here we go. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? I go all the way to the end. Or does it explode? Walter chooses to explode, and perhaps he is the one with the biggest dreams. And in that respect, I think that Walter is the figure that changes the most in the play. He begins in one place, and he ends in a completely different place. His biggest change is his coming into manhood. At the very end, I'm going to be talking about that. Mama says, well, he's actually become a man, right? Finally. And that is no small feat. And in that respect, you could see, even though I am saying that this is a feminine play, you could see, if you see the play from Walter's perspective, you could see this play as a coming of age play. I just want to say that about Walter because I had to. Now, Mama Lina. She is a woman in her early 60s, full-bodied and strong. She is one of those women of a certain age, of a certain grace and beauty, who wear it so unobtrusively that it takes a while to notice. Her dark brown face is surrounded by the total whiteness of her hair, and being a woman who has adjusted to many things in life and overcome many more, her face is full of strength. She has, as we can see, wit and faith of a kind that keep her eyes lit and full of interest and expectancy. She is, in a word, a beautiful woman. Her bearing is perhaps most like the noble bearing of women of the Hereros in Southwest Africa. Her speech, on the other hand, is as careless as her carriage is precise, but her voice is perhaps not so much quiet as simply soft. Now, I wanted to make, and I'll give it to you later, but I wanted to give you the Harlem Renaissance presentation, and I will eventually, because I believe that it is not only the Langston Hughes poem, What Happens to a Dream Deferred, what Hansberry is relying on from the Harlem Renaissance. And I make a very brief aside. Up until or around the time of the Harlem Renaissance, there were certain types. When I say type, is a type of character, kind of ready-made, in Black literature, right? So you would have, and just to name a few, the mammy, kind of the big, fat, maternal woman that would raise kids, would raise children, white children in a family, who is all good and all saintly and nice, etc., etc. The mammy, kind of the opposite of the mammy, will be the Jezebel, the black seductress, the temptress. We call them that. These are the types, right? The mammy, the Jezebel, the Pickaninny, that is a little kid, kind of a thief, who works at the cotton plantations, and the like, right? So the authors of the Harlem Renaissance kind of took those, I'm not going to say stereotypes because they were types, right? And they replaced them with other types. And I will perhaps talk a little bit more about that. But for example, the royal Negro. Remember that Negro is a word that should never, ever be said unless we're referring to the literature of the Harlem Renaissance for sure, because just for you to show, oh, where is it? Sorry. Okay, Alan Locke's book, written in 25, was called The New Negro, and you have that word coming over and over in the book, but that is a word that we should never say, except when we talk about, for example, Negro culture. But the royal Negro is one of those figures that appeared in the Harlem Renaissance, as opposed to these other types, right? So, Mama is the beautiful matriarch. She is, excuse me, the engine of the dreams of this family. After all, she is the one that has the money to make those dreams come true, right? So as I said, she somehow represents the figure of the mammy, and she is the optimist of the house, right? She is the optimist. Now, what do you think of Mama? Ideas. Do you like her? Do you hate her?
Well, I think we
Yes,
have some kinds of mixed feelings in different moments of the play. Sometimes we like her, and sometimes we despise her, particularly when she is disciplining her children as if they were very young. I don't know, telling Walter what to do with his life. But as you were saying, in the moments in which she's optimistic and she wants to keep the family together, well, we kind of like her.
Okay. Somebody else wanted to say something. Yes.
She's the one who clings to the past to the most. I mean, in comparison to the others, she cannot understand change, some changes at least, especially when it comes to her daughter Benny. And
yes.
How she relates to men and things of the sort.
Yes.
She supports her in her regarding her professional ambitions, the fact that she wants to become a doctor, etc. Well, at least at the beginning. But when it comes to her relationship with men, no, she cannot understand the modern, postmodern, but
well, yeah, I'm going to say modern at the time, right? It was 59. Yes.
He's the voice of the moral values of the Black community.
I like that. I like that. Music is a strong symbol in the play, and the Negro spirituals, that they listen to, the religious songs that date back to the times of slavery, are somehow her thing. So we're going to be talking about that momentarily. So Mama is the matriarch, but this doesn't mean that, and even though I say that this is a feminine play, that doesn't mean that she is the forward-thinking feminist that you may think. Because as the matriarch, she is the defender and protector of patriarchy. And this is no small feat. Think about it.
Yeah, she's like only waiting for Walter to come of age, as you have just said, in order to be able to cede the role of the main figure in the family. The moment she realizes that, she's not the matriarch anymore.
Well, she will be the matriarch in the sense that she will be a non-reigning queen, right? She will be the figure of the wise woman, the oracle that people go to. However, she will relinquish her power. She will only have spiritual power, if you will, right? But in that respect, she noticed that Mama is always very careful to keep the memory of Walter Sr., right, the father, her husband, alive. He is the one that did this. Because of him is the one, because we have this check. The future of the family comes from. So she is holding the torch between the two men, the one that is dead and the son, until he comes of age. And I think that that is very interesting.
Yes, and there's never a chance that the daughter, even though is more educated apparently than Walter,
Yes.
might be the leading member of the family.
Oh,
It's
she'll
never
never
referred
be.
to.
She'll never be in that family, but I bet that she would be in her own family when or if she decides to get married. Now, Ruth is about 30. We can see that she was a pretty girl, even exceptionally so. But now it is apparent that life has been little that she expected, and disappointment has already begun to hang in her face. Notice to hang in her face, and you have here, does it sag, right, in the poem, right? Maybe just sags like a heavy load. Somehow Ruth is there, kind of sagging, right? She is weary. Notice, remember that I told you about the word weary that we saw in Zoo's story. She is weary as the apartment. However, she's the breadwinner. She respects the matriarchy of Mama, but she expects patriarchy. Do you follow me?
Yes.
And there is this tiny little thing to keep in mind of her abortion, or possible abortion, or the abortion that she considered at time, because her role in the family, even the abortion itself, would be a very private thing, a very individual thing, and that is part of matriarchy, right? Holding, not in the sense that Mama would accept it, because she doesn't, but it is the woman's choice in that respect, right? And Benita, who is about 20 and slim, etc., 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 with an education, better English, etc., she is Lorraine Hansberry's alter ego. Hansberry is present in the play in Benita, right? She represents the modern, younger generation of African American women, right? She is intelligent. She cares about the African heritage, her African heritage. I like to think of her as, because this is around 1950, say, because the play is set in between the end of World War II, 1945, and the present, which will be 1959. So roughly, I would like to think that she is 20, 1950. I would like to think of her as one of these great authors like Maya Angelou or Alice Walker, who came after her and who in the 80s, etc., who became very popular, famous, and who were of a certain age in the 80s, being her, right? Benita, because she's the thinker. She has two suitors, two possible boyfriends, etc. Notice how in that respect again, there is like this motif, the choice of Hercules motif. Are you familiar with the choice of Hercules motif in literature?
No.
The choice of Hercules a motif in literature is like a ready-made plot type, right? And and they have very set names, and they are like, you know, rags to riches. The character starts the story being poor, rags, wearing rags, and he becomes very rich at the end of the story, rags to riches. Coming of age is another one, you know, a character that begins being one way and ends being another way. The voyage is another motif, like a character that begins a voyage in a way. Innocent Gulliver's Travels would be one example, right? And ends his trips being wise, possibly old too, right? And the choice of Hercules is another one of these literary motifs. It's a story, usually a man, hence Hercules, who has to choose between two women. It is always like that, but in that respect, I think that it works for Beneatha too. One of the women is a virginal blonde who would make a wonderful mother, but who is frigid, right? Doesn't like sex. And the other one, who is a bombshell, who is usually a redhead or a brunette, and who is wonderful having sex, wonderful in bed, but who would never be a mother or a housewife. The choice of Hercules is having to choose between these two, and the choice is impossible because they're so different. And Beneatha has to choose between the Nigerian prince and the millionaire, right? And in that respect, I think that there may be something of the choice of Hercules motif here, right? So again, very interesting perspective for you to consider about Beneatha's character. Now, I gave you an article about womanism, right? In Ghani's article, she says some of the issues that Hansberry has as a woman is cared about racism, sexism, class, and gender oppression, female representation in public and private life, and sterilization. If you're interested in womanism, you have Layli Phillips' article, Introduction to Womanism, on its own, right? For you to keep in mind. Now, womanism is, I'm going to say, somehow an old-fashioned concept. Womanism started in the 80s, and it is kind of a feminism without the political connotation of the word feminism. Do you follow me?
Yes.
All right. Now,
Yes.
more contemporary theories, or a more contemporary theory would be intersectionality. This is an article that is quite interesting toward field of intersectionality studies, theory, applications, and practice. This is by Cho, Crenshaw, and McCall. And intersectionality does, what it does is it doesn't simply say, it is not about the fact that you're a woman. It's that you are a blind woman. It is not that you are a blind woman. It's that you are a lesbian, a blind lesbian. So what it does, intersectionality studies all the different characteristics that may undermine equality, right? And different issues, because sometimes the feminist used to think of womanhood, right? But then what about race? What about sexual orientation? What about ability? What about religion, right? What about if you're rich or poor, right? There are questions of privilege and there are questions of underprivilege. And that is what intersectionality studies. This is a lot newer as a theory to study, just to give you something simpler. There are different factors that may impair your possibility. And if you have them because they are mainstream, like male and white and WASP or Anglo-Saxon and Protestant and mainstream and heterosexual, you have all the privilege of the world, and there are other issues that may impair that or those privileges, and you that may hamper the possibility of your development. So if you're interested, I'd be happy to share with you these ideas of the article, the Cho article on intersectionality. This is Crenshaw discussing intersectionality.
I'm sorry, is the audio on? Because I cannot hear.
You
Yes,
cannot?
I cannot hear either.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to interrupt, but
No, I'm sorry. I thought because I could hear it very well. Let me just double do it again. And interrupt again, please, if you cannot hear it. It's only 2 minutes long, but there will be another 3-minute video later. So interrupt if you cannot hear it, okay? Am I sharing the screen now?
yes.
Again?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Can you hear music?
Yes.
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 Okay. All right.
Yes, intersectionality is just a metaphor for understanding the ways that multiple forms of inequality or disadvantage sometimes compound themselves, and they create obstacles that often are not understood within conventional ways of thinking about anti-racism or feminism or whatever social justice advocacy structures we have. Intersectionality isn't so much a grand theory, it's a prism for understanding certain kinds of problems. African American girls are 6 times more likely to be suspended than white girls. That's probably a race and a gender problem. It's not just a race problem, it's not just a gender problem. So I encourage people to think about how the convergence of race stereotypes or gender stereotypes might actually play out in the classroom, between teachers and students, between students and other students, between students and administrators, and commit themselves to understanding that as a way of intervening and providing equal educational opportunity for all students, regardless of their identities. Identity isn't simply a self-contained unit. It is a relationship between people in history, people in communities, people in institutions. So schools do a good job when they understand that and when they commit themselves to curricular development to opportunities in the school for all students to understand the histories that have brought us to this particular moment. You can't change outcomes without understanding how they've come about. So independent schools can take the lead on that to be responsive to their student populations and to the communities out of which the students come.
Okay. So, intersectionality then, a very interesting, well, Crenshaw doesn't call it a theory, but I'm going to say it's a body of ideas that may constitute a theory for analysis, and it's very new, so go there. Now, themes in A Raisin in the Sun. Am I going too fast?
No, it's okay.
No, no, no.
Okay,
No, it's okay.
Good. Walter's coming of age as a man, the clash of patriarchy and matriarchy, racism and segregation, the Black American dream, assimilationism versus heritage, universalism and particularism, and Africa and America. So, just to go over them, then we're going to be talking about the symbols that are very interesting. Walter's coming of age as a man, patriarchy versus matriarchy. As I said, Mama is the protector and the defender of patriarchy, right? And that is not an indictment on her. Remember that this is 1959, right? But when Mama gives the money to Walter, she says, what you ain't never understood is that I ain't got nothing, don't own nothing, ain't never really wanted nothing that wasn't for you. There ain't nothing as precious to me. That is interesting, right? That she is saying, nothing is more precious than you. Where does that leave Benita? Monday morning, I want you to take this money and take $3,000 and put it in a savings account for Benita's medical schooling. The rest, you put in a checking account with your name on it. Walter stares at the money and he says, you trust me like that, Mama? Notice that this is 2/3 into the play, right? And Mama is trying hard to make a man out of Walter, right? So she gives him the money. Notice also at the same time that the money is almost equally divided there, right? In 3, right? Mama, Walter, and Benita. But then he takes all the money, right? And the money changes Walter. Changes very positively Walter, of course, until Bobo comes around and we realize how stupid Walter has been and his stupid dream and all of that. But Mama is the keeper of patriarchy, making, notice that right before the next quote, when Walter wants to go to Lindbergh and say, okay, give us the money, we won't go live in that neighborhood, in that white neighborhood, in Clybourne Park, Mama says, okay, but you go and do that in front of your kid, in front of your son. If you're not going to be a man, and that is how Mama, the matriarch, is the keeper of patriarchy. If you're not going to be a man, not be a man in front of your son. And so Mama forces him in a way to become a man. And so She is the keeper of patriarchy. And at the end, she says, quietly, woman to woman, he finally came into his manhood today, didn't he? Kind of like a rainbow after the rain. I thought that that was kind of interesting. So, can I move on?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Racism and segregation and the Black American dream. Notice that what Erasing in the Sun does is it presents a very clear picture of Black living conditions at the turn of the century in 59, right? There are cockroaches in that apartment that march like Napoleon. And the rent was high, the neighborhoods were segregated. So Ruth, studying her mother-in-law furtively and concentrating on her ironing, anxious to encourage without seeming to. Well, Lord knows we put enough rent into this here rat trap to pay for 4 houses by now. We're talking about the rent, right? And Lindner says, looking round at the hostile faces and reaching and assembling his hat and briefcase, well, I don't understand why you people are reacting this way. What do you think you're going to gain by moving into a neighborhood where you just aren't wanted and where some elements, well, people can get awful worked up and they feel that their whole way of life and everything they've worked for is threatened, right? That is pure racism. And what Hansberry did is she put it in on the stage on Broadway, right? Notice that the Black American dream, the symbol of the Black American dream here is the check, right? The money, the $10,000. And that is the desire to get a legacy for Travis, the little kid, right? The 6th generation American after, not after slavery, but born in the United States. And the dream, the American dream that is represented by the house is conflicted with the promise of violence that they are going to suffer if they move to Clybourne Park, right? So, the broader themes, just to discuss, because it's 7 and we still have 2 or 3 things to mention. Universalism versus particularism. I already talked about this one. The universal is the economic hardship that you may encounter in life, and the particularism is how that applies specifically to Black folk, to this Black family. And so the universality of the subject would allow white audiences to feel identified with these Black people, right? And I think that that is fascinating, really, right? So you would have on the Black experience in the particularism, but also think that the universality of the subject would allow this play to be performed in Argentina, right? Now, gender roles, in spite of this idea of Mama protecting patriarchy, notice how forward thinking a lot of these ideas, or the ideas in this play, are regarding gender roles. Mama buys the house, there's Ruth's abortion, Benita studying at university to be a doctor and not a nurse, as her brother would like. even her thinking of moving to Africa, I think that is fascinating, really. And then Africa and America is also a theme, because in the United States there is this idea, the attachment of African Americans to their African culture, the relationship of African Americans to Africa. And that somehow brings in this idea of the royal black that I talked about in the Harlem Renaissance, right? And assimilationism versus heritage is the dichotomy, the dilemma that Beneatha is in, or that she denounces all the time, right? You all want to be white, or look like white, or have the white dreams. You know what that is called? As kind of as an insult to many blacks that don't have a black American dream, but the white American dream. They are called coconuts, because they're brown on the outside but white on the inside. That is the idea of assimilationism, right? Okay. Symbols to watch out for. Abortion is a symbol of trying to avoid the problems, but is on the part of Ruth, trying to save her family, but killing her offspring. But at the same time, it is a symbol of her independence in a way. Now, the rest are pretty straightforward, and I'll go over them, but I would like you to think, and we could talk like 2-3 minutes perhaps, of food. What can you tell me about food as a symbol? Are you there? Because I cannot see you.
Yes.
We are.
Okay.
I'm trying to think
I-
about that.
That
I
is
was just thinking about, I don't know what it means or if it is related to food as a symbol, but the scene in which the neighbor comes.
yes.
And they offer her the cake, or I don't know,
Yeah,
pie.
sweet
She says,
potato
I don't
pie.
want that, but still keep sitting. And at the same time, she's very, I don't think that insulting is the word, but she's very
Oh, she
envious
is.
of them.
She is horrible.
Mm.
Totally jealous. Food is, if you think about it, and you could write a beautiful paper on the symbology of food, is always a form of silencing people in the play.
Para mí esto es una cosa muy importante.
Silencing people. And I think that is fascinating, because food comes up over and over, and the kid has, Travis has breakfast, and Walter, she says, okay, eat your eggs, right? And then they tell this woman, oh, have some sweet potato pie, right? There's always food involved, and that food is a way of covering for a lot of the problems in the family, I think. It would be similar in a way, but from a more negative way, I think, of our Spanish saying, panza llena, corazón contento, right? In a way, it is a symbol of covering your ideas, right? And I find that fascinating. Well, of course, money is salvation. Mama's plant and sunlight, very interesting symbol here, because you know at the very beginning that they say that they only have one window in the apartment, and there's that little plant there that is almost dying all the time, that perhaps will not see the spring, but it does eventually. And the fight for life in that family, in living in that very dark apartment, is a fight for hope, for a life, for a future, right? Can we survive without sunlight? Well, the plant and the sunlight represents the hope that travels with them, because at the end, Mama carries the plant and she is given the gardening tools to put that plant down in a garden, right? Out in the sun, right? And I think that is a very interesting symbol. Beneatha's hair, again, unthinkable in the 50s that a woman would show her hair just like that. The nappy hair is more of a 60s rebellion thing, right? But Beneatha's hair represents her rejection of assimilationism. And I find that fascinating. Now, well, the house on Clybourne Park, I haven't forgotten about music. I'm going to close with music. The house on Clybourne Park, again, represents the American dream, the hope for the family, a hope that social climbing, but hope that will not come easy, right? Somebody's microphone is on. Please turn it off, because I hear a lot of feedback. Ah, thank you. I get so stressed with that noise. So that is the house. And music, I wanted to call your attention to the 3 types of music that we hear throughout the play. There's the blues. They play the blues a lot on the phonograph. Then there's the Nigerian folk songs, the record that is given to Beneatha by the African Kid. And then there's the spirituals. And in that respect, music is also a symbol, because the blues represent the African, the merging, the amalgamation of the African culture and the American culture. The blues being like jazz and American rhythm, right? The Nigerian folk songs represent the heritage, the Black heritage, the respect for the Black roots. And the spirituals, again, remember that spirituals are religious songs of the African American community that date back to the time of slavery, and that is deeply religious, and that gives comfort to Mama and to Ruth, that the Negro spirituals. But at the same time, Walter, when he is hopeful about the future, he sings a lot. He sings all children's God's children have wings, etc. That is a Negro spiritual too. The Negro spirituals, that is the most traditional of Black music, is what binds the family together, right? And the dream, of course, is that the house on Clybourne Park again is a symbol of a dream no longer deferred, right? I think that is interesting. Now, any questions? Are we clear? I still have one more video to show, very short. But do you have any questions?
No.
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 Wonderful. Now, Clybourne Park. This is, I find this fascinating. Because A Raisin in the Sun was written in 1959, and it's, of course, the story of this family. The Pulitzer Prize of 2011 is a play called Clybourne Park. I find that fascinating. So, I'll show you a clip in a bit. Clybourne Park is a spin-off, of course not written by Hansberry because she died in 65, but it's a spin-off to Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun, written by Bruce Norris, which premiered in New York in 2010. It presents events set during, that is Act 1, and after Hansberry's play. Clybourne Park was awarded the 2011 Pulitzer Prize for Drama and the 2012 Tony Award for Best Play. Act 1 is set in 1959, approximately 1 hour following Carl Lindbergh's departure from the Youngers' home, and Act 2 in 2009, 50 years later, when the now all-black neighborhood is about to undergo a process of gentrification. I find that fascinating. I'd love to see this play. So the one character common of the two in the two plays is Carl Lindner, right? The person who wants to buy them out. So we'll see this. This is 1959.
It wouldn't take but 2 minutes. It's just, I got these things here to take care of.
Oh, I can put them in the car.
Oh, you got yourself a car?
Yes, sir.
Hey, what's that, a Pontiac?
Yes, sir.
It's just, I'm afraid we're gonna be late.
Late for what?
The place we gotta be.
Now, Russ, you know as well as I do that this is a progressive community.
What's he talking about?
If you take the case of Gelman's Grocery, it's a fine example of how we've all embraced a different way of thinking.
Slow down a second. Bev, get Ted Driscoll on the phone.
What for?
Well, Carl says Carl is claiming.
Russ, I have met personally with the family.
What family?
He claims his family, the family to whom Ted sold the house.
It's a colored family. First one family will leave, then another, then another. And each time they do, the values of these properties will decline. And once that process begins, once you break that egg, Bev, all the king's horses, etc. And some of us, you see, those who don't have the opportunity to simply pick up and move at the drop of a hat, well, those folks are left holding the bag. I don't know if you saw this about the history of the changing ethnic
distribution.
Of the
I should
neighborhood.
read that.
In the 70s and 80s, how that was followed by a period of rapid
decline.
No,
Not trouble. She didn't mean.
There was trouble.
Well, economic trouble.
Drugs are trouble.
That's what I'm saying.
Violence is trouble.
Exactly.
And the violence as an outgrowth of the criminalization of those drugs.
Because you know the two of us was both crackheads.
I'd love to sit here and review all of American history. Maybe we should concentrate on the plans for your property, which has
the
been
history
the
of America is the history of private property.
That may be,
Read the
though
Tocqueville.
I rather doubt your grandparents were sold as private property.
Oh my God! Look, humans are territorial, okay?
Who are you?
This is why we have wars. One group, one tribe tries to usurp some territory, and now you guys have this territory, right? And you don't like having it stolen away from you the way white people stole everything else from Black America. We get it, okay? We apologize, but what good does that do if we perpetually fall into the same predictable little euphemistic tap dance around the topic?
All right, let me get out of here. Okay. Here we go. All right. Here we're again. Oh, you're still here. That's good. So, that is my presentation and the class for today. Do you have any questions? Is there anything that we could discuss now? You're tired, I don't know.
I really like your class. It was really interesting, and I need to keep on reading and watching. I really love it. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure, really. Remember that for Unit 2, now you can see me, right? I've done everything right. Okay. Now remember that for Unit 4, this is Unit 2, there's only one play, no theory. Thank you very much. No theory whatsoever. Only one play, and you have the whole performance and a talk with its playwright. So take the chance and make sure to read Wit. That's why I did this. Then again, you have 2 plays and 3 articles, etc. But what I would like you to do for the next unit and for Wit, by the way, Wit, you're going to see the play is written with a semicolon instead of the I, but of course we call it Wit with the I. We are going to focus on the postmodern features in the play, intertextuality, etc., etc., etc. Those are not the articles that Professor Buteler has given you, but the ones that are in the folder, in the Google Drive folder, right? That you also have to read, etc., etc. And in any case, as I said, because there is no theory, I will be again making a presentation of sorts, and we will be talking a little bit more this time, because I feel that I rushed and it was just a monologue on my part. So there will be better chances for us to talk. But take the chance, because it will be halfway through the course, so only one play to read. Yes, you're welcome, all of you. You're very welcome. So that is it, Paulina. When you finish recording, do send this via Google Drive so that I can upload it. Okay, send it to me. So that I can upload it in the class for anybody, just in case you just feel like watching these 2 hours again and again and again. So thank you very much for being here, for your attention, for the class, and again, do not hesitate to write if you have any questions whatsoever. Okay?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Have a nice
Bye.
weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.